There's a question that sounds almost too simple to ask, and yet almost nobody gets it right. If you wanted to build strong, capable legs that could carry you up mountains in your 70s, sprint after a grandchild in your 60s, and stand up from a chair without thinking about it in your 80s, what would you do? Most people, without hesitation, would say walking. Walk more. Walk every day. Walk 10,000 steps. It has become almost a modern religion, this idea that walking is the universal answer to leg strength, longevity, and lower body health. And here's the strange part. Walking is wonderful. It's one of the best things you can do for your heart, your mind, your mood, your metabolism. But when it comes to actually building strong legs, walking is, scientifically speaking, almost useless. There's another exercise, a single movement, that outperforms walking so dramatically that researchers studying aging muscle have started calling it the closest thing we have to a fountain of youth for the lower body. And the wild part is that you've been doing it badly your entire life. You do it every time you sit down. You do it every time you stand up. You do it hundreds of times a day without noticing. It's the squat. And to understand why this one humble movement beats walking so completely, we have to take a journey through evolutionary biology, physics, neuroscience, and a strange little experiment Richard Feynman would have loved because it begins with a paradox. Here's the paradox. If walking built strong legs, then mail carriers, nurses, waiters, and farmers, people who walk 20, 30, even 40,000 steps a day, should have the strongest, most powerful legs on earth. They should be able to leap off chairs in their 80s. They should never fall. But study after study shows something almost the opposite. Lifelong walkers, when tested in a lab, often have leg strength barely distinguishable from sedentary office workers of the same age. Their cardiovascular systems are healthier, yes. Their joints might be looser. But the raw force their quadriceps can produce, the explosive power their glutes can generate, the ability of their calves to resist collapse, these are often shockingly low. Meanwhile, an elderly person who has been doing slow, deliberate squats 3 times a week for a few years can often produce more leg force than someone 20 years younger who walks daily. How can that be? How can a movement you do for 30 seconds outperform one you do for 30,000 steps? The answer lies in a principle physicists understand intuitively, but most people have never connected to their own bodies. It's called the overload principle, and it's really just a restatement of something Galileo figured out 4 centuries ago when he started dropping objects off towers and rolling balls down ramps. Galileo realized that to change the state of an object, to accelerate it, to deform it, to do anything interesting to it, you have to apply a force greater than the forces already acting on it. A feather on a table isn't changed by gravity pulling it down because the table pushes back with exactly enough force to cancel gravity out. Nothing happens. The system is in equilibrium. Now imagine your leg muscles as that feather. Every day, gravity tugs on you with a force equal to your body weight. Your legs have already adapted long ago to handle that load. Walking, for the most part, just shuffles that same load forward and backward. Each step puts about 1 to 1.5 times your body weight through your leg, briefly, in a direction your leg has handled millions of times. There's no novel stimulus. There's nothing your muscles haven't already solved. Biologically, your body sees no reason to invest precious resources building new muscle tissue, because the existing tissue is more than sufficient for the job. It's the same reason a blacksmith doesn't get stronger by picking up a pencil 10,000 times. The load isn't challenging the system, and muscle, contrary to popular belief, doesn't grow because you use it. It grows because you challenge it beyond what it's currently capable of handling comfortably. Walking, for most adults, is comfortably below that threshold. It is, in muscular terms, the pencil. Now consider the squat. When you lower yourself into a deep squat and then stand back up, something extraordinary happens that walking simply cannot replicate. At the bottom of a squat, your quadriceps are stretched under load. Your glutes are in a lengthened position while bearing weight. Your knees, hips, and ankles are all simultaneously flexed to extreme ranges. To stand up, your nervous system has to recruit nearly every major muscle fiber in your lower body at once, in a coordinated, escalating wave of force production. The mechanical demand at the bottom of a squat can be 3, 4, even 5 times higher on individual muscle fibers than walking ever produces, even with no added weight. You are essentially asking your body to perform a controlled defiance of gravity from a mechanically disadvantaged position, and your body, evolved over millions of years to be ruthlessly economical, has no choice but to respond. It must build the tissue, recruit the neurons, and reinforce the bones to meet the demand. This is why the squat works. Not because it's magical, because it forces the body into a situation walking never does. It puts you briefly briefly into a state where your current strength is genuinely insufficient, and biology only listens when biology is being challenged. There's a beautiful experiment that illustrates this, conducted by a Danish research group in the early 2000s. They took two groups of older adults, all in their late 60s and 70s, and gave one group a daily walking program. The other group did a much shorter routine, just twice a week, of slow bodyweight squats and step-ups. After 12 weeks, the walking group had improved cardiovascular markers but barely any change in leg strength or muscle mass. The squat group had increased leg strength by an average of 30 to 40%, had measurably larger thigh muscles, and, most striking of all, had significantly improved their balance and their ability to rise from a chair, the single best predictor of independent living in old age. 12 weeks, just twice a week. A movement people associate with gym bros and powerlifters had quietly outperformed the world's most beloved exercise by a margin that should make us all reconsider our assumptions. And yet, when this study was published, it barely made the news. Walking was too sacred. The squat was too undignified. Culturally, we'd already decided which one was wholesome. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the squat isn't just better for muscles, it's better for the part of the body almost everyone forgets about until it betrays them: bone. Your skeleton is not the inert scaffold most people imagine. It is a living, dynamic tissue, constantly being torn down and rebuilt by cells called osteoclasts and osteoblasts. And bone, like muscle, only invests in itself when it's under genuine stress. The German physician Julius Wolff figured this out in the 1890s, and the principle now bears his name. Wolff's law states that bone adapts to the loads under which it is placed. Astronauts in microgravity, where their bones experience no significant load, lose bone density at terrifying rates, about 1 to 2% per month. Sedentary elderly people, whose bones rarely experience anything more demanding than walking, also lose bone density, just more slowly. But people who regularly load their skeleton with squatting motions, where the spine, hips, knees, and ankles all bear substantial vertical force, maintain and often increase their bone density well into old age. Walking, again, produces only mild bone loading, well within the range your skeleton already considers normal. The squat, especially at depth, places loads on the femur and the spine that the body interprets as a signal to reinforce. It is the difference between living in a house and renovating one. Without genuine load, your bones see no reason to renovate. They begin, slowly, to dismantle themselves. And then there's the nervous system, which is perhaps the most underappreciated player in this entire story. We tend to think of strength as something held in the muscle, but it's really held in the wires running from your brain to that muscle. Your spinal cord and motor neurons decide which muscle fibers to activate, when, and how forcefully. In a sedentary person, the brain has essentially forgotten how to recruit the largest, most powerful muscle fibers, called type 2 fibers. These fibers are the explosive ones, the ones that catch you when you trip, the ones that let you sprint to catch a bus or push yourself up from the floor. Walking activates almost none of them because walking doesn't need them. It's a low-intensity, repetitive activity that lives entirely in the slow-twitch type 1 fiber world. The squat, by contrast, especially when performed slowly or with any added resistance, demands type 2 fiber recruitment. It forces the brain to relearn the neural pathways that go silent in sedentary adults. This is why people who start squatting, even just bodyweight squats, often report feeling more athletic within weeks before any visible muscle change has occurred. The muscle hasn't grown yet. The brain has simply remembered how to use what was already there. There's a haunting statistic in the geriatric literature. The reason elderly people fall is almost never that their muscles are too small. It's that their nervous systems can no longer recruit those muscles fast enough to catch a stumble. Walking does nothing to address this. Squatting does. And the difference in terms of survival in old age is enormous. Let me offer you a thought experiment, the kind Feynman loved. Imagine two identical twins, separated at age 30. One walks 10,000 steps every single day for the next 40 years, rain or shine, never misses. By age 70, that twin has walked roughly 140 million steps. The other twin does nothing but a single set of 20 bodyweight squats, 3 times a week, for the same 40 years. That's about 6,000 squats per year, or 240,000 squats total. The walker has performed nearly 600 times more repetitions. And yet, if you brought both twins into a lab at age 70 and tested their ability to rise from a chair, climb stairs, balance on one foot, or catch themselves from a fall, the squatter would, in nearly every meaningful measure, dominate. The walker would have a better resting heart rate. The walker would have walked thousands of beautiful miles, but the squatter would have the legs of a much younger person. This is not speculation. This is essentially what longitudinal studies on resistance training in older adults consistently show, and it raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If something this simple, this short, this free produces such outsized benefits, why isn't everyone doing it? The answer, I think, has to do with how human beings perceive effort. Walking feels productive because it covers distance. You can see the ground passing beneath you. Squatting feels like nothing because you end where you began. Our brains evolved to value motion through space, not motion through gravity. But biologically, your body cares only about the second one. There's a fascinating historical thread here, too. For most of human evolution, the squat was not an exercise. It was a resting position. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies in Africa, the Amazon, and parts of Southeast Asia have noted that people in these cultures spend several hours a day in a deep squat. They squat to cook. They squat to eat. They squat to socialize. They squat to relieve themselves. The chair, as we know it, is a remarkably recent invention in evolutionary terms. For the vast majority of human history, the squat was simply how humans existed when they weren't standing or lying down, which means our bodies were designed, quite literally, with the expectation that we would spend significant time in deep hip and knee flexion under load. Modern life has eliminated this almost entirely. We sit in chairs from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed. We sit to eat, sit to drive, sit to work, sit to relax. The deep squat position, which our ancestors used as a default resting posture, has become, for most adults, physically impossible. Try it. Try to lower yourself into a flat-footed deep squat and stay there for 5 minutes. Most adults can't do it for 30 seconds. Their ankles won't bend, their hips won't open, their lower backs scream. This isn't because squatting is unnatural, it's because we've become unnatural. We've allowed a position that was once as common as breathing to become a movement so foreign that we now need YouTube videos to relearn it. And here is where the counterintuitive twist arrives. The reason squats build legs so effectively isn't just because they load the muscles, it's because they restore something we've lost. They reteach the body a movement pattern it was designed for but has forgotten. When you squat, you're not adding something exotic to your routine. You're returning to a default state. You're putting your body back into the shape evolution carved for it. The strength gains, the bone density, the balance, the longevity, these aren't really gifts the squat gives you. They're things your body was always supposed to have that it gave up when you started spending 16 hours a day in a chair. The squat is less an exercise than a reclamation. This reframing matters because it changes what you're doing when you do them. You're not punishing yourself. You're not adding stress. You're removing a deficit. You're paying back a debt your modern lifestyle has been racking up since you were a teenager. And the body, with astonishing forgiveness, will begin to repay you the moment you start. There's a wonderful study from Brazil that put this idea on the map. A researcher named Claudio Gil Araujo developed what he called the sitting-rising test. He asked people to sit down on the floor from a standing position and then stand back up, using as little support as possible. Each hand or knee used for support cost a point. He gave the test to over 2,000 adults and then tracked them for years. What he found was almost unbelievable. The score on this simple test, which is essentially a measure of how well you can perform a deep squat, predicted all-cause mortality with stunning accuracy. People who scored poorly were 6 times more likely to die in the following 6 years than people who scored well, even after adjusting for age, sex, and body mass index. 6 times. From a 30-second test, walking ability did not predict mortality nearly as strongly. The ability to lower and raise oneself, which is exactly what a squat is, turned out to be one of the most powerful biomarkers of biological age ever discovered. Think about what this means. The single movement you've been ignoring is also the single movement that best predicts how long you will live, not your cholesterol, not your blood pressure, whether you can stand up off the floor. Evolution, it seems, has been trying to tell us something, and we've been too busy walking to listen. Now, I want to be careful here, because none of this means walking is bad. Walking is magnificent. It regulates blood sugar, it lowers cortisol, it improves mood, it extends life. It's one of the few activities humans can do indefinitely without injury. The point is not that walking is useless. The point is that walking and squatting do entirely different jobs, and we have, as a culture, mistakenly assumed walking does both. Walking is for the cardiovascular system, the metabolic system, the brain. Squatting is for the muscles, the bones, the nervous system, the structural integrity of the body. They are not interchangeable. They are not even competing. They are complementary. But because walking is socially acceptable and squatting feels strange in a culture obsessed with treadmills and step counters, we have collectively overinvested in one and almost completely ignored the other. The result is a generation of adults who can walk for miles but cannot stand up from a low couch without using their hands. Let me give you one more piece of physics to make this concrete. Force, in the Newtonian sense, equals mass times acceleration. When you walk, the acceleration involved in each step is tiny. Your center of mass moves up and down by perhaps an inch. Your body experiences a force only slightly greater than gravity itself. When you squat, however, especially when you descend and rise with control, your center of mass moves through 1 to 2 feet of vertical distance, and the deceleration at the bottom, followed by the acceleration to stand, produces forces on your muscles that can be many times higher than walking. This is just arithmetic. A larger range of motion, performed against gravity, produces a larger force on the muscle. There is no escaping this. No amount of walking can compensate for the simple geometric fact that walking moves your body horizontally, while squatting moves it vertically through a meaningful distance. Your muscles only grow in response to force, and force, in the gravitational sense, is dictated by vertical motion. This is also why climbing stairs builds legs much faster than walking on flat ground, and why hiking uphill is so much more transformative than walking on a treadmill. Vertical movement is the currency of leg strength. Horizontal movement, no matter how much of it you do, is paid in a different currency entirely. So what should you actually do with this information? You don't need a gym. You don't need weights. You don't need a trainer. You need to do what your great-great-grandparents did without thinking. Lower yourself toward the ground, slowly, with control, as deeply as your body allows, and then stand back up. Do it 10 times. Do it 20. Do it whenever you boil a kettle or wait for a microwave. Make it a habit so small it barely qualifies as exercise. The research suggests that even 3 short sessions per week of 15 to 30 bodyweight squats is enough to produce measurable improvements in leg strength, bone density, and balance within 2 or 3 months. The body responds to this movement with an eagerness that almost no other exercise can elicit, because it isn't learning something new, it's remembering something old. And as your range of motion improves, as your ankles loosen and your hips open, you'll find that the deep squat, the one that felt impossible a few months ago, starts to feel natural again. You'll feel younger, not because you've added years to your life, but because you've returned to a movement that defined human life for 100,000 generations before yours. There's a final thought I want to leave you with, and it's one of those mind-bending insights that ties everything together. Aging, in the way most people experience it, is not really about time. It's about the gradual loss of movement patterns. Babies are born able to squat perfectly. Toddlers spend half their lives in deep squats, picking up toys, examining ants, watching the world from 2 feet off the ground. Their bodies are extraordinary, and we marvel at them. Somewhere between childhood and middle age, we lose this. We lose it not because of biology, but because of chairs, because of culture, because of the slow erosion of a movement so basic we forgot it was ever a skill. And then in our 70s and 80s, when we can no longer squat, we say this is what aging looks like. But it isn't. It's what disuse looks like. The squat isn't a youthful movement because young people do it. Young people stay young in part because they do it. Take it away and the aging accelerates. Restore it even decades later and something remarkable happens. The body responds, the bones thicken, the muscles return, the balance improves, the nervous system wakes up, and the strange, undignified, deeply human act of lowering yourself toward the ground and standing back up, the act we have collectively forgotten in our cushioned modern lives, turns out to be one of the most powerful interventions against aging ever discovered. Not in a laboratory, not in a pill, in your own living room, in 30 seconds a day. A movement so simple it feels like nothing, and so profound it predicts how long you will live. Walking will carry you through the world, but the squat, quietly, invisibly, is what keeps the world from carrying you away.